is about the worst day of my life. I know a lot of people are probably rolling their eyes like, what's the matter? You had like your order gets screwed up at Starbucks or something? And no, it's not that. So this story is from August 22nd, 2010. At the time, as Ryan mentioned, I was a infantry soldier. Our unit was deployed to Afghanistan. That day, we were on a mission to find Taliban insurgents who were posing as Afghan army soldiers. The mission was a joint mission between the French, U.S., and Afghan army. The French army kind of controlled the region that we were in, and so they kind of knew the local leaders and things like that. So they helped us out with that kind of logistic stuff. The U.S., our job was to train the Afghan soldiers to go basically door to door looking for the things we're looking for, army uniforms, weapons, things like that. And our job was to also serve as kind of like a backup support thing. So should things go wrong, we were there to kind of assist them. So that day we flew in well before sunrise to a mountain nearby the village that we're going to. And at first light, we moved down the mountain and started going through the village. So the Afghan soldiers didn't really find what we were looking for. They found a few weapons, a few uniforms and things like that, but nothing, they didn't find any of the people we were looking for. So as we were wrapping up the mission, we were heading back up the mountain, and I get a call on the radio saying that the unit's commander was looking for me. Now, if you know anything about the chain of command in the military, the only real time that the commander would be looking for one of the subordinates like that is if I did something really, really good or really, really bad. I didn't do any exceptional work that day, so I was pretty nervous. I started checking all my guys' equipment, making sure everything was accounted for, nothing was missing or anything like that. I didn't know what could have been wrong, but why he wanted to find me was still a mystery to me. So eventually I got back up to the top of the mountain, I caught up with him, and he tells me that he had some bad news for me. Now, that needed to be relayed to me. And if you know how that works, if you're deployed overseas, you don't exactly have like cell phone coverage or internet access all the time, so it's really, really hard to get messages from back home. And so where my mind first went was maybe something happened to someone at home. Maybe someone was in a car accident, or an elderly family member maybe passed away or something, and that message needed to get relayed to me. Also at the time, my brother was also an infantryman and also deployed to Afghanistan. He was about 100 miles away from where I was. And my commander told me that his unit had gotten ambushed and that he was hit. So I'm thinking to myself, he'll be fine, right? I mean, he got hit, like he might be injured, but what does he need? Does he need like blood or an organ or something? Get me on a helicopter, let me help. But I didn't listen closely enough because he wasn't going to be fine. He was killed. So naturally, I broke down on that mountaintop. But I didn't get a whole ton of time to grieve, because within a few minutes of getting that terrible news, our own unit started getting attacked. RPG and machine gun fire was coming from several different directions, and I had soldiers to lead. I had to tell them where they need to be positioned, how far apart they need to be spaced out, so that should a grenade or something like that come near them, I wouldn't lose my whole team, in one go. And so my tears were going to have to wait. I kind of had to suck it up. Now, fast forward a few hours, we successfully stopped this attack. Luckily, no casualties on our end. And I was flown to the main air base in Afghanistan. There were other soldiers there at the time, but I didn't really know any of them, so I had nobody really to talk to. I couldn't call home either to talk to my family, because due to the time difference, we were unsure whether or not my family had received notice of my brother's passing. So I really felt alone. I had nobody to talk to. Next morning, I was on a flight out of Afghanistan escorting my brother and another soldier who was killed in that same ambush. And at that point, I still hadn't called home. It wasn't until I got to Kuwait a few hours later that I was able to call home with a borrowed calling card that had about 10 or 15 minutes on it, that I was able to call home. That was really the only time I had to talk to anybody back home. Eventually I did get home. My family met me at the airport and brought me to my parents' house. But something that's kind of a little bit unique in this situation is when a hometown hero passes away, all the news media wants to know about it. The television, the radio, the newspaper reporters were all lined up outside my parents' house, wanting some sort of interview, some sort of information about what had gone on. When I first pulled into my parents' driveway, I was thinking to myself, screw these people, I don't really care what they want. I'm going in there, I'm going to be with my family, going to take care of what I need to take care of. But then I thought, how selfish of me is that? That I'm going to go take care of myself now, but then they still want a story. So where are they going to get the story from? It's not going to come from us. It's not going to be, good information or whatever. And what are they going to end up talking about my brother, on the news and stuff? And so my father and I decided to kind of be the unofficial spokespeople of our family and went out and talked to them. Eventually, after I'd been home for a little while, the Army even took me away from my family to go process me back into the United States, which they do for all deploying soldiers. So I guess the point is, from the first time the first gunshot that was fired at us on that day, I stopped grieving. And I operated as if it was business as usual, which it wasn't, and I got burned out. About a year ago, I was in Las Vegas with my family, and I saw a sign for the Blue Man Group, and I just casually mentioned to my wife, it'd be kind of cool to go see their shows sometime. And she looked at me like I was nuts. She said, we saw them just a couple months after you got back from Afghanistan. Like, don't you remember that? I don't. I have no recollection of it whatsoever. There's entire events that have been completely wiped from my memory. My son's first birthday, for example, I only remember from photos. It was a few months after I got back, too. I know this is an extreme example, but it shows how your brain can react to stress if it's not dealt with properly. You might think you're doing fine. At the time, I kind of did. But after long hours and long days of not taking care of yourself, your brain starts to act a little funny, and you don't even realize it at the time. You might have any of these signs of burnout, or you might experience some of these signs of burnout. And if you're feeling these kind of symptoms, your body kind of telling yourself it's time for a break. Or someone else may come to you and say, it seems like you're forgetting things a lot, or stuff like that. Or you seem awfully irritable or angry or whatever. Maybe it's a sign for you to take a break and not keep going the way you've been going. And if you're having any difficulty, especially with things like depression and anger issues, definitely go seek professional help. There's no shame in any of that. So I said I was an infantry soldier with the U.S. Army, and technically that's true. But as Ryan mentioned, I was in the Connecticut Army National Guard, which is part of the U.S. Army. But to active duty soldiers, the National Guard is kind of a joke. For anyone who's unfamiliar with the National Guard, I know there's a lot of people who are not from around here. National Guard soldiers are kind of part-time soldiers. Some people call them the reserves and things like that. National Guard soldiers have regular civilian jobs, full-time jobs, or they might go to college, but they also do Army training 1 week in a month and 2 weeks a year. Whereas on the other hand, active duty soldiers train full-time. So calling myself a soldier felt an awful lot like imposter syndrome. But since we have had regular jobs or went to school or whatever, there's a high chance that our soldiers did things other than kick in doors and shoot at bad guys for a living. Sure, we didn't train as frequently, but it didn't mean that we were unprepared for our mission when we were deployed overseas. About 2.5 months before we were deployed, we went on active duty and we trained full-time for that time period. Plus, add in a diverse range of skill sets from our civilian jobs, it kind of became invaluable when we were overseas. Think about having a mechanic riding along in your truck in the middle of a scorching desert when your truck breaks down. Kind of useful. A lot of active duty soldiers don't have that luxury. I have an accounting degree, and right now I'm standing in front of a room full of developers, networking and talking about developer kind of stuff. Has absolutely nothing to do with my background. I've never taken a formal programming class. I'm completely self-taught. But on the other hand, there might be a programmer who studied computer science and may not have the same business background that I have. So if they're trying to start up their own business, it may be a little bit harder for them. And it's also likely that they had to learn on their own, the same way I learned how to code on my own. So don't worry about anyone else's background. Focus on the things that make you uniquely qualified to do the things that you do. Do you really need that traditional education or job experience to do your job? Probably not. I mean, actually, I talked to quite a few people in here that don't have that traditional, computer science kind of background that you might think. And if you're able to do the job that you're doing while incorporating your own unique set of skills, that's, I think, what's really important. And that can kind of help you get over your imposter syndrome. So in basic training, we were taught basic medical skills, things like how to stop bleeding and CPR and how to clear an airway and things like that, basic life-saving skills. We're also, when we were deployed, we were issued these first aid kits. So we all had medical supplies with us. So in the event of an emergency where someone gets shot or something like that, you don't have to wait for a medic to come to help you out. A lot of times that might not even be a possibility for the medic to get to you. So we really had no excuse not to help out a buddy who got shot or injured or something like that, if that kind of thing happened. We had the training and we had the equipment to fix most kind of injuries, most of the common injuries that we'd find. Except for in basic training, we were taught from day one that security comes first, right? So you can't really help a guy who was shot if the machine gun's still firing in that direction. You're going to get shot too. Same idea as when you're on an airplane. A lot of us flew here. They tell you before you take off, put on your mask, your oxygen mask first before helping others. Think about it, if you're flying with your kid and you go and help your kid first, you can't get the mask on in time, you're going to pass out, and then they're going to pass out. And so you're now useless to them because you're both passed out. You didn't take care of yourself first. In the Army, you can't help an injured friend or another soldier until all the threats are eliminated. Maybe you have to return fire, or maybe you have to throw grenades or call in an airstrike or something like that. Only when it was relatively safe could you go out from behind cover and help. Now let's bring it back to kind of this world. How often are you asked to help someone? Right? It might be a custom code job or some consulting or side project kind of thing. And sure, you could help out. And it might even be the nice thing to do. A lot of us are probably faced with that same type of dilemma. But what are you neglecting when you go and help those people? Sure, you might make a little bit of money, but now you don't have time to spend with your family or do the real work that you're supposed to be doing. I'm not saying it's bad to help people. It's not. It's actually really the reason why I'm standing here now is to try to share my experience and help everyone here. But just remember that you're also useless to everyone if you can't help yourself first. Part of the Soldier's Creed is on the board here. It says, I will always place the mission first. I will never accept defeat and I will never quit. How is that possible? Obviously, we're all going to fail at something at some point in time. The mindset, though, is that no matter what the challenge, we can't be the reason that we fail. We can't quit on ourselves. But we do that a lot because we have a fear of failing. Right? But the fear of failing stems from doubt. And doubting doesn't mean that you can't do something. It just means that you're afraid of failing and you choose not to try. You might experience this doubt as not trying new things or not accepting a challenging project that pushes you outside of your comfort zone. Maybe from procrastinating or anxiety or failing to follow through on something. You might have low self-confidence or even being a perfectionist, where you'll only do things that you know you can do 100% perfectly every single time. Or on the other hand, you may not finish something because it's not done 100% perfectly, causing yourself to miss out on other opportunities. As a soldier, we had backup plans for our backup plans that had backup plans for those backup plans. It's hard to fail when you have so many backup plans. We even allowed ourselves to change the plan on the fly if we needed to. But I guess the point is, create a plan or multiple plans that make it really hard for yourself to fail. And if you do fail, don't think of it as failure, but think of it as a chance for redirection. The worst day that I talked about earlier redirected me to a whole new career. It kind of sounds strange that would do that, but obviously I didn't plan for the day to happen the way it did. But after having the chance to recognize the burnout that I had and reevaluate my situation, I realized that I wanted to spend more time with my family. I didn't want to work the long hours of an accountant. I didn't want to also have the danger of being a soldier. My family already went through enough. I wanted to work in a field that was more rewarding to me personally, and I was able to kind of recognize that. And so despite seeming like a failure, the events of that day set me on a course that put me on this stage today. My name's Scott DeLuzio. You can find me on my website, scottdeluzio.com, or on Twitter at scottdeluzio. Thank you. I think we have a few minutes for questions, if anyone has anything. One in the back.
Okay. I'm ready. So you talked about some of the signs of burnout and things, and if a lot of this conversation was framed about yourself, but what
Sure.
if you see someone else in your life, a family member, a loved one, a partner, a friend, who is experiencing these things and maybe they ask for help? What's the best way to be supportive and help them without being overbearing?
Sure. So you definitely, yeah, exactly. I think you kind of touched on that at the end. You don't want to be overbearing. You don't want to say you need to do this, you need to do that, you need to, whatever, because then that to them feels like, okay, now I have one more thing I need to do. That's just adding one more thing, pulling them away from, whatever it is that they whatever their objectives are or whatever. But be supportive and listen. Another kind of personal story I had. After I got back, I had a lot of issues. A lot of the symptoms and signs that were up on the screen there. I think I probably checked the box on all of them. And my wife started noticing, and she said, it wouldn't be the worst idea in the world if you went and talked to somebody, And just being able to talk things out helped me tremendously. And so, it was a time in my life that was difficult, and I think taking that all on myself was just something that wasn't realistic. And so being able to talk things out with somebody really helped me personally. So I can't say that it's going to help everybody, obviously, but for me it certainly helped. When people are going through things, the worst idea I think is to try to go through it alone. And so if you can get some sort of help, whether it's from a loved one or a friend or going to talk to a therapist or something like that, I don't think that that's a bad idea. So.
All right, thank you, Scott.